This just in, Florida Congressman Corey Mills has formally filed articles of impeachment against President Joe Biden over his threat to withhold arms to Israel.
Congressman, on what grounds would you impeach President Biden? But on what grounds is it an impeachable offense? Is it a high crime and misdemeanor? Really?
Well, it's a day that ends in Y, which means yet again a Republican has officially filed articles of impeachment against President Biden. And though the reason is so stupid that even Fox News is skeptical, it has nothing to do with Hunter Biden, so we have to talk about it. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bell before you go. I'd greatly appreciate it. All right, friends, we have several clips to look at in this video, and some of them are fascinating because, again, even Fox propagandists are deeply skeptical of the notion of this particular impeachment, which they should be with all impeachment efforts against the president. I digress. Let me first play the clip in which it's announced that a Republican congressman is filing these articles.
This just in, Florida Congressman Corey Mills has formally filed articles of impeachment against President Joe Biden over his threat to withhold arms to Israel. The legislation consists of a single article citing abuse of presidential power. It reads in part, in violation of his oath to faithfully execute the office of president and to uphold the Constitution, President Biden abused the powers of his office by soliciting a quid pro quo with Israel while leveraging vital military aid for policy changes. This egregious action not only compromised the credibility of the United States, but also undermined the interest of our longstanding ally, Israel.
So that was Kayleigh McEnany, a former Trump White House press secretary, reading that announcement. You can probably hear the smugness in her voice. And we'll get to it. Basically, what Corey Mills is doing is he took the first article of impeachment filed against Donald Trump when he was president and basically just switched out some of the names, Biden, Israel instead of Ukraine. We'll get into that. And again, we've got more clips, so stand by, but let's break it down from the Business Insider article. Republican who voted twice against Israel aid wants to impeach Biden for threatening to hold it back. Again, note the irony. Corey Mills wants to impeach Biden after he threatened to withhold some aid to Israel, but the Florida congressman voted against that very aid twice. So obviously he has no interest in getting aid to Israel, which, I mean, that's his policy preference. That's fine. But he's punishing or trying to punish Biden for doing something that he voted to do himself. Very interesting. He also inaccurately conflates Biden's move with the Ukraine quid pro quo that got Trump impeached. Corey Mills wants to impeach Biden for withholding military aid to Israel that the Florida representative voted against twice. While stressing that he would continue to supply defensive weapons to Israel, Biden said in a CNN interview earlier this week that the United States would not supply further offensive weapons, including bombs and artillery shells, to the Jewish state if it proceeds with a full-scale invasion of Rafah, which would lead to a humanitarian catastrophe. The U.S. has already paused the transfer of thousands of other bombs. Mills, a freshman lawmaker and former arms dealer, argued that Biden's move amounted to a quid pro quo. Biden is pressuring Israel, our biggest ally in the Middle East, by pausing their funding that's already been approved in the House if they don't stop all operations with Hamas. Mills told Fox News it's a very clear message, this for that. Yet when the House voted to approve that very aid last month, Mills was among the 21 Republicans who voted against it, leading the American Israel Public Affairs Committee, AIPAC, to halt fundraising to the Florida congressman. Mills was among the 14 Republicans who voted against a clean standalone Israel aid bill in February. While otherwise staunchly pro-Israel, Mills said that he is only supportive of a version of the Israel aid package that included billions in cuts to the IRS. Okay? He also expressed opposition to providing aid to Gaza, and April's package included more than $9 billion in humanitarian aid, and it has a tweet from him to that effect. And this is where we get into the meat of it. Like other Republicans, the Florida congressman is likening Biden's moves to former President Donald Trump's leveraging of military aid to pressure Ukraine into investigating Hunter Biden, which spurred Trump's first impeachment. Actually, I do want to play a clip here real quick because you have a Democratic strategist, Kevin Walling, who went on the Fox Propaganda Network and made this point to Harris Faulkner and Kayleigh McEnany and others who tried to conflate the two situations as well.
I'm a Democrat. I hate what I see out of the far left. I'm not a squad member. I hate the rhetoric.
So again, I ask my question, is he going there willingly or are they dragging him?
I think what the president has said about this weapons package is something that, we saw President Reagan do with F-16s in Israel in the past, with their war in Lebanon in 1983, withholding support. George H.W. Bush did the same thing a decade later. This is a tool that presidents often use to affect foreign policy with regards to Israel.
But they impeached Trump for it.
They impeached Trump because Trump tried to get, a foreign government to release bad stuff about a political opponent.
Well, the allegation was that he was interfering with the election. But isn't that the exact same thing? Biden is deliberately changing his policy towards Israel to win votes.
Right. Again, I don't think that's the case. I think he's trying to push for a ceasefire and a swift end to what we're seeing.
You know what's wrong with that? It's so short-sighted.
Innocent people losing their lives.
We had a ceasefire on October 6th.
And so then they change the subject and they won't engage in the substance. But yes, the two situations are very different. So as Kevin Walling points out, and as others point out, I've pointed out in videos past, it's perfectly reasonable for Republican presidents or Democratic presidents to leverage foreign aid to countries in order to affect state policy, basically in order to affect a meaningful policy change in the interest of the United States or humanitarian interests. It's perfectly fair. And again, he cited Ronald Reagan, a Republican president, doing just that. Jimmy Carter did, Barack Obama did. It's a common thing. The question is, are you doing it for corrupt personal reasons? That's what Donald Trump was impeached for, because he threatened foreign aid to Ukraine for corrupt personal reasons. He demanded that the president of Ukraine, Vladimir Zelensky, investigate Joe Biden, a United States politician who was running against Donald Trump in the 2020 election. That has nothing to do with state policy. That has nothing to do with humanitarian concerns. That's Donald Trump threatening to withhold foreign aid to get a foreign country to meddle in a U.S. domestic election on Trump's behalf. Again, that is fundamentally different, and anyone who suggests that the two cases are similar are dishonest losers who should be made fun of. And as the Business Insider points out, the two cases are quite different. Trump was impeached in part for engaging in a corrupt scheme to benefit himself politically, while Biden is withholding the aid out of concerns about Israel's conduct, something that Ronald Reagan did in 1983. And by the way, if you want to make the argument Biden's doing this to placate the far left, well, he's not doing a really good job of that, because he's still getting criticized, and understandably so, from the perspective of a progressive, because he's been seen as too lenient with Israel, right? This isn't going to meaningfully change that. A lot of people are still upset that he didn't take these sorts of actions in the aftermath after October 7th. So this isn't going to win over a ton of people. And if that really was the goal, why wouldn't he have done it sooner? Clearly, right or wrong, but Biden is thinking about this from a position of U.S. policy, not domestic political concerns. Because believe me, if he was motivated about domestic political concerns, he would need to be doing things radically different than what he's doing now, because poll after poll after poll shows a majority of Americans, not even Democrats, but a majority of Americans are unhappy with how the president is managing this crisis. So again, right or wrong, if you want to criticize Joe Biden, I don't think one good faith argument to make is that he's doing things for political self-interest, because almost everyone agrees that this has been politically damaging to Biden. So the whole thing defeats itself. Additionally, the Trump administration was found to have broken the law with his delay of Ukraine aid. Biden could find himself in the same position if he withholds the aid indefinitely, but as one expert told Business Insider, Biden isn't required to send the aid immediately. So again, this is just a constant whataboutism from a dishonest, bad faith Republican Party. But as I mentioned in the beginning, it's so bad, it's so stupid, these articles of impeachment, that even Fox News hosts are very skeptical. Stuart Varney on the Fox Propaganda Network grilled 2 Republican lawmakers after this was announced. And he's like, really? This is what we're doing?
Congressman, on what grounds would you impeach President Biden?
Well, if you look at where we are, Stuart, I mean, President Biden is failing on so many different fronts. But if you look at Israel, you showed those quotes and tweets, what he said when he was a candidate, and he sure was bold then, but he'd probably like to eat some of those words today, because what he's done to Israel, walking away from our strongest ally in the Middle East, is disgraceful. You've got Democrats even admitting that right now. Our main objective is to get Israel the support they need to show that we stand with our ally Israel, even if Joe Biden's walking away because he is now trying to appease the pro-Hamas wing of his party.
Is it a high crime and misdemeanor to walk away from a big ally?
Well, what we want to do is get President Biden to actually go and deliver that aid. I mean, ultimately, Congress.
So again, you notice how he can't answer the question? Stuart Varney, by the way, who was entirely too charitable with the premise. He's like, is walking away from an ally an impeachable offense? Well, Biden hasn't walked away from Israel, right? He has paused one shipment. Paused. And that pause may be lifted soon. We don't know. That's not walking away, especially when Biden has made it abundantly clear in the same interviews that he would continue to provide defensive weapons for the Iron Dome in Israel. So again, he has not divested himself from Israel. He is not walking away from Israel. So that's just a false premise. But what's the crime? And again, even Steve Scalise here gives the game away when he's like, it's even made Democrats mad. Well, Steve, doesn't that undercut the argument that Biden is trying to politically advantage himself? If no matter what he does, he's infuriating one faction of his base or another, then what evidence do you have that he's doing this out of political self-interest? He would need to do something radically different than what he's doing now. There's absolutely no evidence for that whatsoever. Stuart Varney, again, grills another Republican lawmaker shortly thereafter.
Republicans are drafting articles of impeachment against Biden over this arms embargo. Yeah. I take it you would support that, but on what grounds is it an impeachable offense?
So if you think about it, the relationship that we have had with Israel goes back for generations. I spent 2 years in Saudi Arabia as a diplomatic liaison officer. That is the only Western ally, true Western ally, that we have in that entire region. So the idea that the United States will not continue to support Israel, the very country that put the Judeo in Judeo-Christian, is actually an impeachable offense. We have a strong relationship with them.
Is it a high crime and misdemeanor? Really?
A high crime and misdemeanor would be to turn our backs on a country that we have supported for decades.
That's a very political statement.
I mean, the reason the guy's laughing is because he knows it's not true. It would fail to muster to the basis of a high crime and misdemeanor. But I want to play that part one more time.
We have a strong relationship with them.
Is it a
one more here?
Israel, the very country that put the Judeo in Judeo-Christian, is actually an impeachable offense.
To turn your back on Israel is an impeachable offense. Again, false premise. Biden hasn't turned his back on Israel. And even some sort of diplomatic disagreement with an ally, a radical transformation in the relationship between the United States and an ally, since when would that be an impeachable offense? When has that ever been the standard? And again, folks, this is my point. My point is they have nothing of substance. This is just a pure gotcha moment. Anything is an impeachable offense as far as Republicans are concerned against President Biden. If Biden, I don't know, when Barack Obama was president and he wore that tan suit, if President Obama were president today, that would be an impeachable offense. This man would be on here on Fox News, and so would other Republican lawmakers, saying, listen, really, I mean, historically speaking, presidents have only ever worn blue suits. In modern history, a tan suit is an affront to American tradition. It's the red, white, and blue, not the red, white, and tan. And so for a president to wear a tan suit is obviously a signal that he's a communist. And being a communist wearing a tan suit, that's an impeachable offense. That's the sort of crazy stuff that a Republican would be concocting today. But again, it's so bad that even Fox News hosts are deeply skeptical of this. Obviously, it doesn't have the votes to make it past the House. If it made it past the House, it wouldn't get the supermajority needed to convict Biden in the Senate. But this is also proof, folks, that Democrats need to seriously consider worst case scenario if Donald Trump wins the election and we retake the House as we are favored to do, then we should also consider opening up this can of worms and saying, listen, if we're going to start playing these games where you're just going to impeach a Democrat for, again, a tan suit, leveraging foreign aid the way that all presidents have in the past, including Republicans, as long as it's not corrupt, it's fair game, then we're just going to start doing the same thing for Republicans. We need to show Republicans that this is a dead end to engage in these sort of political stunts, that not only will we defeat them, but we will respond in kind. We have to disincentivize Republicans from doing stuff like this. So yeah, here we are at the same time that the House Oversight Committee has not officially ended their impeachment inquiry against President Biden. You have another Republican filing formal articles of impeachment for a nonsense reason, and even Fox News isn't buying it. Let me know what you think in the comments.